So, David, you have written a really incredibly well reported and, I have to say, with all due respect, horrifying story in the HuffPost Highline. It is the story of a guy named Mike Picarella, and we should say that the point of this story is not just the drama and the horrible experience this guy Mike Picarella went through, but that this was indicative of a culture at one of the biggest banks, I guess, maybe in the world. I mean, certainly
Yeah,
in the country. We're talking about HSBC. Why don't you walk us through Mike Picarella's experience, and we will talk about the broader implications of all of this.
sure. So Mike Picarella was a 22-year veteran on Wall Street, worked at Morgan Stanley, worked at Lehman Brothers through the crash, and then went to Barclays. And he starts up at HSBC, which is one of the world's largest banks, in 2011, in May of 2011. And his boss, he quickly comes to realize, is a bit out of control. His boss is named Eileen Hedges. She's profane, she's foul-mouthed, she's always seemingly in the business of her colleagues, and always talking in a sexually charged manner, which, it's Wall Street. That can happen. But what Picarella comes to figure out is that there's a third member of his team, and it's a woman who I call Jill in the piece. What's happening is that almost every night, Eileen is begging Jill to come out with her to a nearby bar, using this young analyst as sort of flypaper to get clients and executives out to the bar. And then the next day, regaling everyone with stories of the sexual exploits of Jill after going to the bar. Maybe pimping is a strong word, but that's close to what we were seeing here. And seemingly so that Eileen Hedges could accumulate chips, pieces of gratitude from big clients and executives at this HSBC Bank. Picarella sees this. He sees it happening. He sees the effect that this is having on Jill, who is continually crying at her desk and all around the office. He tries to solve the problem on his own, or at least alleviate the problem. It really doesn't go away. And eventually, Mike Picarella decides he's got to go to human resources. He's got to go to HR about this. He ends up going to an HR executive who is very good friends with Eileen Hedges. In fact, she had a picture of Eileen Hedges' kids on her desk and said that they were like her kids. And says, I want to keep this private, and I'm not lodging a complaint, but I think that they need to be separated, and I think there's a problem here that I'm looking for advice on how to deal with it. Apparently, within a couple hours, Eileen Hedges finds out about this from HR. They proceed to make Mike's life pretty miserable through a series, years of gradual steps, for everything from assigning him to a new boss who was actually subordinate to him in terms of title, to stripping a lot of his responsibilities away, to retaliating against him in more subtle means, and essentially trying to muster him out of the company as retaliation for reporting sexual harassment. We also detail in the piece how this ended up sidelining Mike, who was part of his duties, at least were in compliance, making sure HSBC was current and updated with all existing laws, and there was a lot of problems with that. And Mike continually brought these up and would constantly be told not to bring them to the attention of senior executives. They were just didn't want to know about it. And so he couldn't help but think that retaliate against him for reporting sexual harassment and getting the bank and some of the top performing executives at the bank in trouble had a secondary intention, and that was to shut up someone who didn't seem like he was part of the team and willing to keep quiet about compliance failures. But it really puts you in the position of what it's like to be a whistleblower and how large corporations deal with dissenting viewpoints and dissenting employees, and how HR is in this impossible position of trying to investigate the company that pays their salaries. So there's a lot involved there, but that's generally what it shows.
All right, so David, I just go back and and look at the first issue, which was this culture where you had a Mike's boss, a woman, had seemingly sort of adopted the cultural touch points that she probably had to learn within on Wall Street, and I guess in terms of the broader implications on the culture, before we even get to the compliance stuff. How prevalent was it, your sense, in the course of this reporting? I mean, because clearly Mike was, who had been a bit of a journeyman, thought this behavior was horrible. But how prevalent is this type of behavior? I mean, was it just a situation that he saw the impact it was having on his colleague, or was it that he saw this behavior and found it to be outrageous and problematic and an anomaly in the world he had grown up in?
I can tell you that Mike, who had a lot of experience on Wall Street, and others who aren't named necessarily in the story, but who I spoke with, who also had a variety of experience on Wall Street, said that what was happening at HSBC was an anomaly. It was not necessarily an anomaly, but out of a whole magnitude above what was going on elsewhere on Wall Street. It was almost a throwback to the kind of 1980s go-go Mad Men kind of culture on Wall Street. And Eileen Hedges certainly tried to fit in with that. I mean, she was most of the stuff I can't really even tell you over commercial radio what she was involved with. It's in the story, though. And but this was something a step beyond what.
Well, let me ask you this: was it a well, let's take a break, and when we come back, I want you to tell me, was this, in terms of that part of the culture, an HSBC problem, or was it an Eileen problem? And then we'll move on to investigate the same question about these issues of compliance. I mean, because I certainly get the sense, based upon what I know about HSBC, that from the compliance perspective, it was a much broader problem than just one employee. But let's talk about that when we come back. I'm Sam Seder. This is Ring of Fire Radio. We're talking to David Dayen about his really must-read piece in HuffPost Highline, Inhuman Resources. We'll be right back after this.